The year 1970 stands as a watershed moment in the modern history of the Republic of Ireland. It was a time defined by a political scandal so profound it threatened to bring down the government and expose deep divisions over the escalating conflict in Northern Ireland. This was the arms crisis. At its core, the crisis involved explosive allegations that senior members of the Irish government had participated in a conspiracy. The plan was to illegally import a substantial cache of weapons, not for the Irish Army, but for Republican paramilitaries, including the newly formed Provisional IRA. The aim was to arm nationalists in the North for their defense against loyalist attacks and state oppression. This event was not just a political drama. It was a defining test of the state's integrity and its official policy towards the violence unfolding just across the border. At the center of this political firestorm was Charles Haughey. At the time, Haughey was a formidable and ambitious figure within the ruling Fianna Fáil party. As the Minister for Finance, he held one of the most powerful positions in the cabinet and was widely seen as a potential future Taoiseach or Prime Minister. His charisma was matched only by his complexity. He was a political operator of immense skill, known for his modernizing economic policies but also for a populist, nationalist streak. He was a man who commanded both fierce loyalty and deep suspicion. His alleged involvement in the arms plot would cast a long shadow over his entire career, becoming the first in a series of major controversies that would follow him for decades, even as he eventually achieved his ambition of leading the country. The roots of the crisis lay in the tumultuous events of August 1969. The Battle of the Bogside in Éire and subsequent sectarian violence across Northern Ireland sent shockwaves through the Republic. The Irish government, led by Jack Lynch, found itself under immense pressure to intervene. In response, a special cabinet subcommittee was formed to oversee policy on the North, and a £100,000 fund was established, officially designated for humanitarian relief for victims of the violence. It was control of this fund that was handed to Charles Haughey. The decision would prove to be catastrophic, as allegations soon emerged that this state money was being covertly diverted for a far more incendiary purpose: the purchase and importation of weapons. Make sure to hit that subscribe button for more content like this. This clandestine operation was not the work of one man alone. A network of influential figures was implicated, creating a cast of characters that read like something from a political thriller. Alongside Haughey was Neil Blaney, the staunchly Republican Minister for Agriculture, who also sat on the Northern Ireland Subcommittee. Crucially, the plot involved an active military officer, Captain James Kelly, an intelligence officer in the Irish Army who acted as a key organizer. The link to Northern Republicans was John Kelly, a respected community activist from Belfast and an IRA member. Rounding out the main players was Albert Loix, a Belgian-born businessman and friend of Haughey, whose international connections were allegedly used to source the weapons. Together, they were accused of orchestrating a conspiracy that directly contradicted the government's official policy of non-intervention. The conspiracy to import arms was a complex and, ultimately, clumsy affair marked by a series of failed attempts. The group allegedly used the government's relief fund, controlled by Haughey, to finance their operations. The first notable effort took place in late 1969, when a deal was attempted in London. However, suspicions that the arms dealer was, in fact, a British intelligence agent caused the plan to collapse. Undeterred, the plotters turned their attention to continental Europe. Through the connections of Albert Loix, a significant shipment was sourced from an arms dealer in Hamburg, Germany. The consignment was substantial, reportedly including machine guns, rifles, pistols, and hundreds of thousands of rounds of ammunition destined for the streets of Northern Ireland. This ambitious plan also hit a snag. In March 1970, the weapons were impounded by authorities in Antwerp, Belgium. The shipment lacked a crucial end-user certificate, a document required to verify the legitimate final destination of the arms. A final, desperate attempt was made in April 1970 to fly the weapons directly from Hamburg to Dublin Airport. This plan was also thwarted, this time by international aviation regulations and the growing scrutiny of security services. The net was closing in. The entire operation was beginning to unravel, not because of a change of heart, but due to logistical incompetence and the watchful eyes of European authorities and, closer to home, officials within the Irish state itself. The plot's ultimate undoing came from within the Irish civil service. Peter Barry, the highly influential and meticulous secretary of the Department of Justice, became aware of the conspiracy. He gathered intelligence from the Garda Special Branch, the state's security police, and took his concerns directly to the top. Barry confronted Taoiseach Jack Lynch with the explosive information. The opposition leader, Liam Cosgrave of the Fine Gael party, also received a tip-off and prepared to confront Lynch in the Dáil and the Irish Parliament. Lynch was now cornered. He could no longer ignore the rogue operation being conducted by members of his own cabinet. The political fuse had been lit, and an explosion was now inevitable. On the 6th of May, 1970, the crisis erupted publicly. After being presented with the evidence, Lynch demanded the resignations of Charles Haughey and Neil Blaney. Both ministers refused, protesting their innocence and effectively daring the Taoiseach to fire them. Lynch did exactly that, dismissing them from the cabinet in a move that stunned the nation. The sackings triggered a political earthquake, exposing the deep ideological rift within Fianna Fáil between Lynch's cautious constitutional approach and the hardline republicanism of the Haughey-Blaney wing. The government was plunged into chaos, and the stage was set for a legal battle that would captivate and divide Ireland. The men were subsequently arrested and charged. The arrests of two recently dismissed senior government ministers, a serving army officer, a Belfast Republican, and a foreign businessman sent shockwaves across Ireland. Charles Haughey, Neil Blaney, Captain James Kelly, John Kelly, and Albert Loix were charged with conspiracy to illegally import arms and ammunition into the state. The charges were unprecedented. They suggested that the apparatus of the Irish state had been co-opted for a secret, unsanctioned military operation in support of paramilitaries in a neighboring jurisdiction. The ensuing legal process became known as the Arms Trial, a spectacle that placed not just the defendants, but the entire political establishment on trial in the court of public opinion. The nation was gripped, watching as the government's dirty laundry was aired in open court. The proceedings began in Dublin's Four Courts, but the path to a verdict was fraught with drama. The first trial collapsed dramatically after just 2 days when the judge, who had made comments seen as prejudicial, discharged the jury. Before the second trial could get fully underway, the case against one of the most prominent defendants, Neil Blaney, was thrown out. The judge ruled that there was insufficient evidence to proceed with the charges against him, a decision that further complicated the political narrative. For Blaney's supporters, it was vindication. For others, it raised questions about the strength of the state's case and whether the full story was being presented to the court. The second trial, held in October 1970, proceeded against the remaining 4 defendants, Haughey, Captain Kelly, John Kelly, and Loix. The prosecution's case rested on the assertion that these men had conspired to import weapons without lawful authority. However, the defense presented a startling counter-narrative. They argued that the operation was not a rogue plot at all. Instead, they claimed it was an officially sanctioned, albeit covert, government action. They contended that senior members of the government, including the Minister for Defense, were aware of the plan and had given it their tacit approval. Captain James Kelly, in his testimony, famously declared, "I do not believe I was engaged in any conspiracy. What I did for the best of my country." In a stunning conclusion to the month-long trial, the jury delivered its verdict. All 4 defendants were acquitted of all charges. The courtroom erupted. Haughey and his co-accused emerged as free men, seemingly exonerated. The verdict was a spectacular defeat for Jack Lynch's government and the state's prosecution. It suggested the jury had accepted the defense's argument that the arms importation plan had some form of official sanction, or at the very least that the prosecution had failed to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. The acquittal did not end the controversy. It deepened it, leaving the public with more questions than answers about who really knew what and when. The acquittal of Charles Haughey and his co-defendants did not draw a line under the arms crisis. Instead, it marked the beginning of a decades-long debate that has haunted Irish politics ever since. The central question of whether the plot was a rogue operation or a semi-official policy has never been definitively answered. Haughey's supporters claimed he was the victim of a political stitch-up, a target for Jack Lynch, who wanted to eliminate a powerful rival. Conversely, Lynch's defenders maintained he was an honorable leader who acted decisively to uphold the rule of law when he discovered a grave conspiracy within his own cabinet. The truth likely lies somewhere in the murky territory between these two opposing narratives. In the aftermath, the political careers of the key players diverged dramatically. Jack Lynch's authority was temporarily strengthened as he was seen to have faced down a major challenge from within his party. Neil Blaney, though the charges against him were dropped, was expelled from Fianna Fáil and went on to form his own independent political dynasty in his native Donegal. The career of Captain James Kelly was ruined. He was forced to resign from the army. For Charles Haughey, the affair was a major setback, but not a fatal one. He endured a period in the political wilderness, on the backbenches, before mounting one of the most remarkable comebacks in Irish history, eventually seizing the leadership of Fianna Fáil and becoming Taoiseach in 1979. The arms crisis remains a subject of intense historical fascination and debate for several reasons. It provides a raw, unfiltered glimpse into the deep and often contradictory feelings within the Irish establishment towards the conflict in Northern Ireland. Officially, the policy was one of peace and constitutional politics. Unofficially, as the crisis revealed, there were powerful elements willing to provide material support to Northern nationalists. The trial and its outcome exposed a fundamental ambiguity at the heart of the state's identity. It forced a reckoning over whether the Irish Republic's primary loyalty lay with the ideal of a united Ireland achieved by any means, or with the stability and security of its own democratic institutions. Today, more than half a century since those dramatic events of 1970, the arms crisis continues to be re-examined through new books, documentaries, and historical analysis. It serves as a crucial case study in the complexities of Irish politics, the power of personality, and the profound impact of the Northern Ireland Troubles on the Republic. Subsequent revelations about Charles Haughey's controversial financial dealings and personal life have only added further layers to the mystery surrounding his true role. The crisis remains a potent symbol of a turbulent era, a time when the Irish state was forced to confront its own conscience and decide what kind of nation it truly wanted to be. The questions it raised are as relevant today as they were then.